Yo, what's going on YouTube? Welcome back to my channel, man. In this video, we're going to talk about 5 lessons that I learned from running my wholesale business model over the years. This can work in any industry, so I'm going to give you my exact lessons and some of the mistakes that I've been able to learn. So make sure to like and subscribe on this video. Let's get started, man. So number 1 is going to be start small but think big. You see, in this business, you don't have to actually have everything figured out, right? Like any kind of business, if you're just determined, you're hungry, you're going to persevere, right? So for me, when I first started this business, I started with $365, right? So it shows you that anything is possible. Anyone can do wholesaling, retailing, right? But it just comes down to really just starting small, right? You don't have to have it all figured out. Like you don't have to have a physical location or some type of like fancy setup, right? Literally all I did was in the beginning, right? I started buying and selling. As I started to grow my capital, right, I realized that I could just do this at a much faster pace and also to serve way more people. And that's where the wholesale business model really came in, because I realized that why not just serve more clients in exchange to get a bigger payout, right? Because I realized, in the beginning, I was meeting 1 to 2 customers in a day, right? Sometimes 3, 4, or 5, right? But then as I started to grow my capital, right, I realized I could just sell more in volume and make way more money, right? And so starting small is going to be key, right? You don't have to have, $20,000. You could literally start off with $1,000 to $500 to flip phones, right? And also too, you could do wholesaling with a smaller amount as well too. You could buy 20, 30 phones at like, let's say 30, $40 and still spend like $600 and still be able to sell it to someone who is in the phone business, right, at a much more better pace. So start small, like I said, 500 to 1,000, right, and still until you start building your capital, then you can start going bigger, right? So number 2 is going to be, don't focus so much on revenue. Instead, focus on building relationships, right? A lot of people, they forget about this part where they focus on transactional selling, meaning they only focus on making $1 off their customers or their wholesale buyers, right? But what you got to focus on is repeatable customers, repeatable buyers, right? And the only way you're going to do is if you're actually genuine about building relationships. At the end of the day, the iPhone is the product, but that on the other side, people are human beings. So treating someone like an actual human being is going to be crucial, right? I see a lot of times nowadays, people always, want to come into this game. They're only looking to make $1, but they're not actually worrying about the product. The actual people in the product and why they're actually coming back to you. If you can figure out why people keep coming back to you, then you actually want them over instead of focusing on only doing one transaction and then they're never going to come back to you. So focus on building repeatable buyers where every time you make a sale, right, thanking that buyer for doing business with you, right, and following up as well too. How you grow your buyers is ultimately you have to prospect as many people as possible, right? So in the beginning, when I was first doing this, all I did was I went to my local area, right? You could do this too on Google My Business. Literally, all you could do is search up phone shops near me, right? And you just start prospecting, calling people left and right, right? Here's the thing. You're going to get a bunch of no's, but are you willing to stay persistent enough until you get a bunch of yeses? And in the beginning too, essentially you are an underdog, so nobody trusts you. Nobody wants to do business with you because they feel like, oh, like, who is this guy? And the biggest thing they're going to tell you too, biggest rejection, they're going to tell you things like, oh, I have my supplier who sells me these phones at a much better pace. I get phones from them. But at the end of the day, their supplier is overseas. Their supplier is in different parts of the world. For me, I'm on the ground, right? So your advantage is literally you could just go to them and meet them one-on-one. But are you willing to do the unscalable to scale? Meaning, the unscalable to scale is meeting people one-on-one and actually get to know who they are. You see, there's a lot of businesses out there who need your help, but you just don't want to go and show up. So what I started to do is I started going out there in the market, but I started meeting these business owners one-to-one, right? And I started doing this one by one. I had, bunch of phones, a bunch of laptops. I would just carry them and go see these people and realize a lot of these people are just working in the business, meaning a lot of them are the CEO, right? And they're going to be there for you to meet them. But are you willing to get rejected a bunch of times before you get what you're looking for? And that's what most people forget. They just want to, make 10 calls and finally someone answer. But are you willing to do 50, then do 100, right? And then finally be able to get that answer. So it's about staying consistent and just being more persistent and hungry in the marketplace to stand out. So that's number 2 is, you want to focus on building relationships and not transactions, because transactions, they only happen once. Relationships, they're a lifetime, right? So every time you nurture someone, every time you plant a seed, right, you're not just thinking about one time, twice, or three times. You're thinking about a lifetime relationship, right? And this is the only way to scale or grow any kind of business, is when you obsess about your customers or your buyers list. Who can they keep coming back to me because they feel like they're getting good business with you compared to them going to someone else, right? Who they probably might pay less, who might pay low. So what makes you stand out in the markets? You got to know what your value proposition is and what makes you stand out. Number 3 is going to be, cash is king, right? But you got to have cash flow at the end of the day, right? So, in the beginning, right, like I said, anytime we're buying phones, especially when we're doing wholesale, sometimes we got large amounts of products. It could be anywhere from $50,000 to $100,000, right, in inventory. So looking at that, knowing your numbers is going to be very important. Okay, that's why I like this game so much, to the point where now if I got to spend $10,000, I'm not waiting until next month to get paid. I'm looking to move my product this week or this day. So if I spend 10 bands today, how can I make 20? You know what I'm saying? Or most people, what they do is they spend 10 bands in a month, right? And they're looking to make like 5, right? Because they're just holding on to their inventory. So now you're piling up a bunch of cash and it's just collecting dust. What I like to do is I like to do velocity of money. So every time I spend $1, can I get that dollar back out and make some more in the same transaction? Or I could do it in the same day. For example, let's say you bought an iPhone 11 for $200, right? You're not looking to sell it for $350 to make $150 profit. You're looking to sell it for fast as you can. Let's say you want to sell it for like $320 or $330. You just made $20-30 profit. But if you could do that in a volume number, you can make way more compared to someone who's waiting until next week to sell their product. You know what I'm saying? So this is why understanding your cash is going to be very important, right? So how much money is coming in, right? What is our bottom line here? So if we know our budget this month is, okay, we're going to spend, let's say $30,000. Okay, what is our overhead? What is our cost? Maybe you got a little shop that you're running. Maybe you got a little bit of rent. You got some things you got to pay, right? People you're paying, staff and that kind of thing. As you start to grow, you got to look at those metrics, right? Because in the beginning, all you're doing is you're hustling. You're buying a product, you're buying it for $50, you're selling it for $100. Until you start to grow, now you might have a platform, an automation platform. You might have systems going in the back. These are all expenses that tie up into the business. So you got to look at the overall cost and how much that's going to generate you, right? So that's number 3. Number 4 is going to be create systems, not stress. You see, systems are important in any business. I feel like, just think of it this way, right? You see, when you wake up, you have a routine. Like myself, I wake up, I get some water, then I go to the gym. Typically I'm up around like 6 a.m., right? So I do this routine every morning and it becomes repeatable. It's the same thing with running a business, right? So we got to look at our lead gen strategy. What is our marketing strategy? What is our funnels, right? How are we getting people in, right? So if we have a system for marketing, for, getting customers, right? For understanding, how are these things actually playing out? So if you could do repeatable systems, now we actually have a process, right? So let's say, for example, you want to do sales, right? And, you're not making as much money. I can guarantee you right now, because you're not talking to enough sellers, because at the end of the day, every business, you have to generate leads, right? And you don't have a business until you have leads, right? And so how are you going to generate leads? What sort of activities are you going to do every single day to get people coming into the door to buy your product or service, right? And here's the thing, one thing I realized about sales, you can go 30 days without making a sale. And then at 31st, you can make $5,000 because you've waited so long. What most people give up is they go 5 to 10 and then they just quit, right? A true hustler, he keeps going no matter what, right? So that's the mindset you got to have when you're doing sales, when you're prospecting for clients, is that every single time you follow up, you got to treat it like you're nurturing a sale. Every dollar is a seed that's going to turn into more money, right? So every time you follow up with a customer, think of it as a dollar amount, right? So if they're not responding to you after 3, 4, or 5 times, understand that every dollar counts. And every time you do it, it's getting you one step closer to your goals. And that's why I believe in sales, we can focus more on that process of actually transacting a sale. That will teach us so much more compared to just us getting paid right away. Because that will teach you persistence, that will teach you perseverance, and making sure you never give up on a transaction. So if you could build repeatable systems, like a process that you could keep doing again and again, now you know for sure that you have a marketing system. You got a system to acquire customers, right? You got a system where, you know what I mean, every time you do one thing, you're getting another thing. So it's like a cause and effect. So if we don't have any type of systems in place, then most likely something is leaking. This is why we got to know what our bottlenecks are in the business, right? So there's some people who just don't have a lot of phones. So now you got to find direct buyers, people who could sell your devices. Or there's people always will tell me like, hey, honey, Facebook Marketplace is not working right now. I'm not getting enough leads. So I know for sure, you know, you're lacking some type of lead generation system, right? So how can we work on that? Okay, now we got to go back on the board. How many people are we talking to? Well, if we're only talking to 10 people, then we can't expect to get an outcome. We got to talk to at least 100. So you got to do the law of 100. 100 pieces of content, 100 sales calls, right? And once we do that repeatedly, you're guaranteed in a 30-day window to see some type of result. If you just do that every single day and you don't get anything by the 31st, essentially you will get someone responding to your ad or to your lead, right? So it's about just nurturing those systems so they can become repeatable in the long term. Number 5 is going to be play the long game, right? In any business, nobody's successful right away. It takes a long time for you to see success, right? You see, when you're doing wholesale in the beginning, you know, you're selling 2 to 3 phones, right? You're going retail, you're probably dealing with 5 customers, but wholesale could pay you for a lifetime because you're dealing with so many direct buyers, whether it's from, you know, USA, whether it's from Europe, right? Different parts of the world. As you start to grow your business, you're going to know more people. So if you play the long game, you're thinking about, okay, do I want to do this for long term or do I just want to do this for now, right? Or most people, what they do is, it's like any business, right? There is a starting point. Everybody is excited in the beginning because they feel like, oh, I'm starting this business. I'm about to hustle my way in. You start hustling, you figure out who the buyers are, who the sellers are, because in every market is a buyer and there's a seller. What most people forget is that you got to stay consistent to know that there's bigger games that being played. And the only way to know what is really bigger out there is you just got to stay more consistent. There's going to be a lot of people who come in and come out, right? But to stay standing out in the marketplace, because here's the thing, at the end of the day, no one is going to determine your value. You got to go take what's yours, man. And you see a lot of cats, they come into the game, right? They get very excited in the beginning. Oh, I'm about to start this business. Oh, I'm about to go to the gym. 5, 6 months into a year. And then all of a sudden they go back to their old ways. So now you got to find out what's that one thing that's keeping you up at night that keeps you going. So what is your why? Because your why determines your success, right? Like, why are you actually doing this, right? And for me, at the end of the day, it's about building, you know, a massive a network, a massive, you know, a community of people, like-minded individuals who will come together, right? I think phones is the ends to a means. What I'm doing right now with the phone business, that's the ends to a means. Eventually, this thing is going to cut off. So how can I become a person that gives back to people? Because at the end of the day, we're in business to serve people. We're in business to serve God. We're in business to contribute, right? And once you have that mindset of giving, everything else will take care of it. So for me, it's about what kind of things am I actually doing that is actually impactful, right? Because I could just sell phones all day. I've sold thousands of phones. There's a month where we sold 500, 400, whatever phones. But what is that? Is that really satisfaction? What keeps you up at night? You got to think about that deeply, man. And if you don't got that dog to say, okay, every single day I'm waking up to do this, to move one step closer to my goals, because I'm thinking much bigger, right? And like I said, at the end of the day, man, no one is going to give you respect. You got to go earn it. You know what I mean? And, especially for me, I didn't have all my cards dealt, I'm an immigrant, you know what I mean? So now I know that for sure I got to work 10 times harder than an average person, right? Growing up with a single parent mom, we didn't even have much, right? There's a time where, literally, we grew up on places where, it's rough, you know what I mean? So you got to have a tough skin to really survive in these areas, right? But this teaches you a lot because then you could see how your surroundings are. And once you make it out of those surroundings, and now you can actually see who your true character is. And that's why I believe in business, your character ultimately will come out. That's why you see cats nowadays, they're trying to take advantage of people, but you realize their character comes out eventually. That's why I'm saying your surroundings and the way you're brought up really determines your outcome, because the things that you see when you're young, those tend to dictate your future. So, and this is why I believe it's important that we stay composed. We play the long game. We never try to do anybody bad. We stay humble in the process, right? It always remain that things are not going to be forever. things are going to always change. And as human beings, people always change, man. It's human nature. It's the way life is. So if we have that mindset that, you know, we have to stay composed. We can't be like everybody else. If someone is doing you bad, understand they're doing you bad. They're focusing on just, you know what I mean, trying to make a sale. They're not focusing on building a relationship. You don't gotta be like them. You gotta stand out in the marketplace. And that's why I believe entrepreneurship exists, because it shows you who people are, who people true colors are. But if you just stay long enough in the game to understand who the buyers are, who the sellers are, it comes back to full circle, man. So at the end of the day, man, if you think of it that way, if you think about every transaction that you're making as like a seed that you're building, because once you plant enough seeds, they're gonna harvest one day. But you gotta stay grounded, man. You gotta trust the process and just be humble in the process. You don't want to be like that dude who just, oh, I'm year two, I'm year three. Now I gotta act different. Or now I can't be around these people because you feel like you found something. I realized too, every time you get information, you're not actually above anybody else. Everybody got the same information. But the difference really is about what you do with the information. Some people are abusive. They'll get knowledge, they'll get information, right? That's why capitalism exists. People get power and then they abuse their power, right? But if you're someone who's trusting the process and seeing the way the games are being played in every market, now you can stay composed. Now you can be a little bit more different. And you don't want to be like everybody else. You want to stand out in the crowd and be a little bit more composed and just, you know what I mean, have that empathy and think about the long game. So if you found this video helpful, man, make sure to like this video and stay tuned for the next one.